Do I see it happening? Absolutely. On many different counts. I mean, I see it happening from a PV, photovoltaics perspective, primarily because of declining prices. The revolution that China's made happen because of falling prices has actually paradoxically been devastating for the solar sector, and it's killed a lot of solar businesses around the world, including here in China and here in India and in America and so on. Yeah, I mean it's had a really bad impact on the sector, but you have to think about this long term, because actually it's had a really brilliant impact on people's expectations about what PV can do. And I've met two of those big solar manufacturers in China. I'm a member of the selection committee for the Zayed Future Energy Prize, which is the world's largest renewable energy prize in Abu Dhabi, and I go out to the World Future Energy Summit every year in January, and I've met two of those guys. They're big, tough players. And I said to them, so you're doing pretty well in terms of falling costs and rising efficiencies. Efficiency is increasing every year, nothing like as much as falling costs, but they are increasing. And they've got it down to around $1 a watt now. And I said, so that's grid parity. So what's your projection as to where you're going to go? And they said, well, we don't talk about projections. But there is no technological impediment to PV going to 50 cents a watt. Now, at 50 cents a watt, PV is competitive practically anywhere in the world, even on grid-based systems, let alone off-grid. So at 50 cents a watt, this revolution kicks in big time. And I talk to a lot of people in the world, and they say, in the energy world, and they say, yeah, there's no reason PV shouldn't go to 50 cents a watt. I don't think people have thought through the implications of what that really looks like. Now, concentrated solar power, which is obviously different than the Desert Tech story, I have done a lot of research on that because there are real enthusiasts for CSP, and there are a lot of people who don't think it'll ever go to scale because it's too expensive. It's fascinating. The biggest CSP plant in the world, as you probably know, is just in the process of being commissioned now. 380 megawatts in America, in Arizona. With storage, which is what makes this story for me so fascinating. This is a molten salt storage capability built into the biggest CSP plant anywhere in the world. And the economics still don't really add up at the moment. It's still too expensive. But the truth of it is that if you can continue to get that scale, you can crack the storage problem, you can begin to get the cost coming down, then CSP in the right place could be an absolutely huge contributor to the solar story. And then you look into what I call the innovation pipeline. And for instance, if you look at the Fraunhofer Solar Institute and all of their amazing work on what's going on with different solar technologies, particularly the use of nanotechnology to enhance efficiencies and conversion rates and so on. I don't know, you just look at that and you think, okay, take that out for 10, 15 years. This technology is capable of doing so much more than it does today. So I'm pretty confident that the solar story is one that is as powerful as its exponents believe it to be, and one which most mainstream politicians don't understand. They think it's a little bit of nice green bling on the side, and they don't really get it. They don't understand that this is a revolution. And India, the government, state governments in particular, are still obsessed with extending the grid as the principal means by which they can meet people's needs. Now, it's as if they just haven't sort of kept up with what's going on technologically. You look at the combination of solar, bio, mini hydro and wind with mini grids in off-grid contexts. There is no reason why in 10, 15 years' time why rural communities in India shouldn't have access to all the energy services they need for making their lives better, for making their lives work. And it's a bit like mobile telephony. To me, the analogy is very, very similar. if you look at what mobile telephony has done to off-grid people, as it were, people who don't have fixed line services, it's revolutionized their lives. And nobody now, not a single person anywhere in the world would say, oh, we need a fixed line telephone system here. Really? I don't think we do. And pretty soon people are going to say, we don't need the grid. We don't need to extend that grid with all the transmission losses that come with that, with all the inefficiencies, all the expense, additional money. You just look at what the World Bank's saying about this now. I mean, it's taken a long time to get the World Bank to understand this, but if you look at their latest report on the potential for distributed energy systems and the benefits that could bring off-grid poor communities around the world, they're kind of talking the language we were talking 15, 20 years ago. I'm glad they've got there. I don't want to be mean about it. They probably could have seen it a little bit earlier if they'd sort of taken on some people who weren't completely stuck in large-scale fossil generation. But, you look at those kind of organizations. The IEA, again, International Energy Agency, talks about distributed energy now. Totally different. So I think a lot of this will start with off-grid stuff. And I don't think technology is the issue. I think it's cultural and financial and political that's the issue. And we were talking about how the financial story is looking now in India, and it's still not brilliant. The financing is still very difficult to sort out at the scale that you've just mentioned. But the potential is there. Looking at the map of financial institutions in India, you have more kind of rural development banks per head of population than any other nation in the world. Now, for me, off-grid renewables underpin every form of rural development. Doesn't matter what you're talking about. Development, therefore, equals the liberation that we all get from energy. And I think India is better placed on that score than many, many countries in the world. And given how significant the rural vote still is to politicians, I mean, this is very different from many countries in the world. The rural vote counts for nothing in most countries. Here, the rural vote, it really counts because, well, for all the reasons we know. So I'm hopeful on that count. Hopeful. In some respects, I'm really concerned that the renewable energy industries globally have been so bad at advocating for policy reform, for redirection of finance, and so on. It really worries me that we've been relatively ineffective in making the case for renewables globally and in each particular country. Same in the UK. I'm not making the criticism of India. Same in the UK. In Germany, they made the case brilliantly. They just got their act together, and you can see the consequences of that now. 15 years on, Germany is an extraordinary example of what you can do when you really drive that agenda. Well, Sweden set the target of being a fossil fuel-free country nearly 10 years ago now, if I remember rightly. Quite a long time ago now. And unlike a lot of countries that set these very ambitious targets, they did map out a kind of a route march for this, a plan to how to get there. And at the last count, Sweden is doing quite well. They're off their target. They're not on target at the moment, but they're doing reasonably well. What's made it possible, of course, is Sweden's continuing use of nuclear in the short term and the import of a lot of Brazilian ethanol, which is controversial in Sweden and anywhere else in the world. And the interesting thing, and I spent quite a bit of time looking at this, is the development of Sweden's own biofuels industry now. Accelerated investment in ethanol from its own forests. Second, third generation biofuels within Sweden, which is an industry that's clearly of enormous importance. So, I don't know. I mean, if Sweden can just keep pushing on harder and harder and harder, I think it's got a reasonably good chance of getting there. Like everything in this world, there are going to have to be some more reminders as to why that's strategically such an important ambition for the country. Lots of people are complaining it's going to cost too much and so on, but you know. not fossil fuel free, because it's a lot of it depends on decarbonizing the grid. And although Germany's done a pretty good job on bringing on a huge amount of renewables, its grid decarbonization story is still some way away. And paradoxically, that's been made more difficult because of the decision to get rid of nuclear by 2022, before the end of the operating lifetime of those reactors. Now, I am not a fan of nuclear power. I think nuclear power is not helpful as a technology to get us to an ultra low carbon economy. I just don't believe I don't think it's going to make any kind of contribution personally. But to close down some of the safest nuclear reactors in the world before the end of their operating life, when you're trying to decarbonize the rest of your grid, I have to be honest, that doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not a nuclear fan at all, but it doesn't make sense to me to take out a big chunk of your low carbon generating capability at the time when you're trying to make efficiency in renewables do the kind of heavy lifting for the economy as a whole. So Germany has got a problem with total grid decarbonization, and coal and gas will continue to play too big a part in Germany's total energy mix for at least the next 15 to 20 years. Well, I've visited Gothenburg a number of times, and I've spent quite a bit of time talking to the city planners in Gothenburg. And I just love the way they go about it. It's a fascinating city. It's a very progressive city, and they've got an ambition to do what I make out they have done in the book. So I just thought, yeah, if you had to pick one city that's going to get there, let's go for Gothenburg.